I asked you to give me a family. You gave me humiliation.
I should have known something was wrong when my wife, Vivian, insisted on throwing herself a pre-summer party on our dime. Not our dime, my dime. The woman hadn't worked a day since we got married 5 years ago, unless you count posting Instagram stories about her morning lattes as a career. Eli, darling, make sure the champagne is perfectly chilled, she called from upstairs, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for when she needed something. Skylar and Jade are bringing their cameras tonight. Of course they were. Everything was content for Vivian's social media empire of exactly 4,000 followers, most of whom were bots or desperate, lonely men sliding into her DMs. I adjusted the bottles in the ice buckets on our rooftop terrace, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the coastal town below. Our historic home sat on one of the better streets in Millbrook, Massachusetts. A fact Vivian never let anyone forget. And remember, she continued, clicking down the stairs in heels that cost more than most people's rent, tonight is about celebration, about us moving forward into this exciting new phase of our lives. I turned to look at her. Even after 5 years, Vivian was undeniably beautiful. Blonde hair that cost $300 every 6 weeks to maintain, a figure preserved by personal trainers I paid for, and clothes that maxed out credit cards I worked 60-hour weeks to cover. But there was something cold behind those green eyes, something that had been growing icier with each passing month. What exactly are we celebrating? I asked, straightening my tie. I'd worn my best suit for this thing, whatever it was. She smiled with Shmuel, but it didn't reach her eyes. You'll see. The first guests arrived at 7 sharp. Skylar Morrison swept in like she owned the place, her husband's banking money evident in every piece of jewelry she wore. Behind her came Jade Chen, the self-proclaimed party planner to the elite, who'd never planned anything more elaborate than brunch reservations. Eli! Skylar air-kissed me, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume. What a lovely little gathering, so intimate. Little, right? I'd spent $3,000 on catering, another $1,000 on alcohol, and God knows how much on the flowers Vivian insisted we needed for 20 people. Where's the birthday girl? Jade asked, scanning the terrace with calculating eyes. It's not my birthday, Vivian laughed, appearing beside me with a champagne flute already in hand. It's something much better. More guests filtered in. Vivian's yoga friends, her book club that never read books, her charity committee that raised money by spending twice as much on galas. I recognized most of them, though none had ever bothered learning my name. To them, I was just Vivian's husband, the guy who restored historic homes and paid for their entertainment. The only face I didn't immediately recognize belonged to a younger man hovering near the bar. Late 20s, perfectly styled dark hair, wearing a linen shirt that probably cost more than my work boots. He had that soft look of someone who'd never done manual labor, never worried about a mortgage payment, never wondered if the business would survive another recession. Who's the kid? I asked Margot quietly. She was the only one in Vivian's circle who'd ever treated me like a human being. Chase Devlin, she whispered back. Some kind of artist, trust fund baby from Boston. Vivian met him at that gallery opening last month. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The late nights at art shows, the new clothes charged to cards I didn't recognize, the way she'd been pulling away physically, emotionally, in every way that mattered. Ladies and gentlemen, Vivian tapped her champagne flute with a fork, the crystal ringing out over the murmur of conversation. I have an announcement to make. The terrace fell silent. Even the ocean breeze seemed to pause, waiting. As you all know, marriage is about growth, about becoming the people we're meant to be. She looked directly at me, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something like regret in her expression. And sometimes, that means admitting when we've outgrown the people we used to be. My stomach dropped. She wouldn't. Not here, not like this, and not in front of all these people. Eli and I have been discussing our future, and we've decided— Hold on, I interrupted, my voice cutting through her prepared speech. Every face turned toward me, eyes wide with anticipation. Before you finish that thought, I have something to say too. Vivian's smile faltered. Eli, maybe we should— No, this is perfect timing. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. I've been thinking about our future too. I dropped to one knee, right there on the terrace, opening the box to reveal a diamond ring that had cost me 2 months' salary. Not an engagement ring. We were already married. Something better. Vivian Margaret Granger, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. We've been married 5 wonderful years, and I think it's time we took the next step. I think it's time we started a family. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Vivian stared down at me, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't quite read. Shock, panic, something that might have been guilt. Eli, she said carefully, we've talked about this. We have, and I know you said you weren't ready before, but look at us. Look at what we've built together. I gestured around the terrace, at our home, the life I'd worked myself into the ground to provide. We have everything we need to give a child a perfect life. Get up, she hissed under her breath. Please, just get up. But I stayed on one knee, the ring box open in my hand, playing my part in whatever sick theater this had become. What do you say, sweetheart? Ready to make me the happiest man alive? The crowd waited. Phones were out now, cameras recording every second of what they thought was going to be a beautiful moment. Vivian looked around at all those expectant faces, trapped by her own need for an audience. She started, then stopped. Her eyes found Chase in the crowd, and something passed between them, some silent communication that confirmed everything I'd already figured out. I can't, she said finally. I won't ruin my figure for someone who can't even keep up with me anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. Around us, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the romantic moment they'd expected to witness. I stayed on one knee for another beat, letting the humiliation wash over me, letting everyone see exactly who Vivian really was. Then I slowly stood, closed the ring box, and slipped it back into my pocket. Well, I said, my voice perfectly calm. That's certainly clear enough. Eli, I didn't mean, she started. Oh, you meant it. I turned to address the crowd, my smile sharp as broken glass. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife has just given me the greatest gift of our marriage, clarity. I walked to the bar, picked up a champagne bottle, and raised it high. A toast, I called out, to my beautiful wife, who just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. To Vivian, may she get everything she deserves. I took a long drink straight from the bottle, then set it down with a sharp crack on the marble bar top. Party's over, folks. Thanks for coming, but I paid for this shindig and I'm calling it. Everyone out. The silence was deafening. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. I said out, I repeated, my voice carrying the authority I'd learned commanding troops during my overseas deployment before I came home to build a life with a woman who'd just publicly castrated me. Now. They moved then, a confused shuffle toward the stairs. Whispered conversations, sideways glances, phones already buzzing with texts to spread the gossip. Vivian stood frozen in the middle of it all, watching her carefully orchestrated evening crumble around her. Chase lingered near the door, clearly torn between fleeing and staying to comfort his lover. I caught his eye and smiled. You too, Picasso. Unless you want to help me clean up the mess you helped make. He fled. Within 10 minutes, the terrace was empty except for Vivian and me. She stood among the abandoned champagne flutes and half-eaten canapes, her perfect party dress suddenly looking like a costume from a play that had closed early. Eli, she said softly, we need to talk. I was already loosening my tie, heading for the stairs. No, we really don't. You said everything that needed saying, loud and clear, in front of everyone who matters to you. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. You were trying to humiliate me in front of your friends. Mission accomplished. I paused at the top of the stairs. Oh, and Vivian, you might want to start looking for somewhere else to stay, and maybe a job. You're going to need one. I left her standing there among the wreckage of her perfect party and went downstairs to my workshop. I had some planning to do. The next morning, I woke up alone in our king-size bed for the first time in 5 years. Vivian had apparently taken my advice about finding somewhere else to stay, probably curled up in Chase's trust fund arms in whatever overpriced condo he was renting in the city. I made coffee in the silence of my own house and sat at the kitchen island, surrounded by the remnants of last night's disaster. Catering trays still covered the counters. Champagne bottles stood like soldiers in formation, most still full. $3,000 of food and drink for a party that lasted less than 2 hours. My phone buzzed constantly with texts I didn't bother reading. The Millbrook Gossip Network was faster than CNN when it came to spreading scandal, and I had given them enough material to fuel conversations for months. But I wasn't interested in damage control. I was interested in damage amplification. I pulled out my laptop and started digging into the financial records, Vivian thought I didn't pay attention to. Credit card statements, bank accounts, Venmo transactions, all the digital breadcrumbs of a cheating wife who'd gotten careless. The evidence was laughably obvious once I knew what to look for. Art supplies purchased at Victoria's Secret, gallery donations that matched exactly with dinner bills at the most expensive restaurants in Boston, yoga retreats that coincided with Chase's social media posts from the same hotels. My favorite was a Venmo payment to Chase for $300 with the memo, "Thanks for the private lesson." Either my wife had developed a sudden passion for finger painting, or she was paying her boy toy for services rendered. I screenshotted everything or organized it into folders and backed it up in 3 different places. Then I called my lawyer. Ruth Blackwood had handled the legal work when I bought the house, and she'd been trying to get me to update my will for 2 years. She was sharp as a scalpel and had about as much patience for BS. "Eli," she answered on the second ring. "I heard about last night. Half the town's talking about it." "Good. That'll make this easier." I leaned back in my chair, watching a seagull land on the terrace where my marriage had died. I need to file for divorce. Fast, clean, and with maximum financial protection. What grounds? Adultery. I've got evidence. How much evidence? I scrolled through the screenshots on my laptop. Enough to wallpaper the courthouse. Can you meet today? I'll clear my afternoon. Bring everything you've got. After I hung up, I drove down to the docks to find Frankie Kowalski at his usual post behind the bar at Murphy's Tavern. Frankie had been my best friend since we were 12 years old, causing trouble on these same docks. Now, he was 42, divorced twice, and the unofficial mayor of Millbrook's working-class gossip network. "Jesus Christ, Eli," he said before I'd even sat down. "You really went nuclear last night." "You heard already?" "Heard?" Margot posted the whole thing on Instagram. "You kneeling there with that ring while your wife basically called you a loser? That's going to be meme material for years." He slid a beer across the bar without being asked. It wasn't even noon, but I figured I'd earned it. "What else are people saying?" Frankie grinned. "That Vivian's been screwing that pretty boy for months. That she was planning to dump you at the party anyway, but you beat her to the punch. That she's been living off your money while treating you like hired help. All true, I know, which is why I saved the best gossip for you personally." He leaned across the bar, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Portis called me this morning. You know how she sits on her porch all day, watching the neighborhood like it's her personal soap opera?" I nodded. Eleanor Portis was 78 years old and had been the unofficial neighborhood watch for the past decade. Nothing happened on our street without her noticing. "She's been keeping track of when that Maserati shows up at your house. Says it's been there every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for the past 2 months, always when your truck's not in the driveway." Tuesdays and Thursdays. My regular job sites in Boston, when I was guaranteed to be gone from 9 to 6. Vivian had been bringing her boyfriend into our bed on a schedule. "Mrs. Portis got pictures? Better, she's got video. Ring doorbell camera with a perfect view of your driveway. Says she's been saving it in case you ever needed it for legal purposes." I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. "Tell Mrs. Portis I'll be by this afternoon with flowers and a fruit basket. And Frankie, keep your ears open. I have a feeling this is just getting started." The meeting with Ruth went exactly as I'd hoped. She reviewed my evidence with the cold efficiency of a surgeon, occasionally nodding or making notes. "This is more than enough for adultery," she said finally. "Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but adultery can still affect asset division and alimony, especially when there's evidence of financial misconduct." "What kind of financial misconduct?" "Using marital assets to support an extramarital relationship. Every dinner she bought him, every hotel room, every gift, that's technically theft from the marital estate." Ruth smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "How much do you think she's spent on this affair?" I'd been calculating that all morning. Conservative estimate, 15,000, maybe 20. And the house is in your name only? Bought it 2 years before we got married. She's never contributed a dime to the mortgage. Business assets? All mine. She's not involved in the company at all. Ruth leaned back in her leather chair, steepling her fingers. "Eli, I can't promise you'll walk away from this marriage richer than when you went into it, but I can absolutely make sure she doesn't profit from cheating on you. What's the timeline? I can have papers filed by tomorrow, served by the end of the week. But before we do that, I'd recommend securing your assets. Close joint accounts, cancel credit cards she has access to, change passwords on everything. Legally, you have every right to protect marital property from further dissipation. I was already reaching for my phone. Consider it done. That evening, I sat in my workshop with Mrs. Portis's flash drive, watching my wife's affair play out in high-definition security footage. There was Chase's silver Maserati pulling into my driveway. There was Vivian greeting him at the door in a silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas. There they were, 2 hours later, him leaving with his shirt untucked and her waving goodbye, like a suburban housewife sending her husband off to work. The rage I felt was clean and cold, like the edge of a well-maintained blade. Vivian had made her choice. She'd chosen to betray our marriage, spend our money, and humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. Now she was going to learn what happened when you declared war on someone who'd actually been to war. I opened my laptop and started making lists. Bank accounts to close, credit cards to cancel, passwords to change, social media accounts to monitor, phone records to subpoena. Then I started on the fun stuff. Vivian's friends, their husbands, their businesses, their secrets. Chase's family, his trust fund, his pretentious art career. Every pressure point, every vulnerability, every way to apply leverage. Vivian thought she'd won last night. She thought she'd successfully traded up from a blue-collar husband to a trust fund prince. She thought she could walk away from our marriage with half of everything I'd built and the sympathy of everyone who mattered. She was about to learn how wrong she was. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to get ugly. V." I deleted it without responding. She was right about one thing. It didn't have to get ugly. It was going to get absolutely relentlessly brutal. Vivian's world started crumbling at 9 a.m. sharp on Wednesday morning when her platinum card got declined at her favorite coffee shop. I knew this because Jade posted about it on Instagram, complete with a photo of Vivian's shocked face and the caption, "When your sugar daddy cuts you off, mash, awkward now coffee problems." By noon, she'd tried 3 other cards with the same result. By 2 p.m., she was calling the bank, only to discover that all joint accounts had been frozen pending divorce proceedings. By 4 p.m., she was standing on my doorstep, pounding on a door that no longer recognized her key. I watched her through the security camera I'd had installed that morning, letting her knock for a full 5 minutes before I opened up. She looked like heck, yesterday's makeup smeared under her eyes, her perfect hair showing dark roots, wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago. "What did you do?" she demanded, pushing past me into the foyer. "I protected marital assets from further dissipation," I said calmly, closing the door behind her. "Ruth's advice. Apparently, it's frowned upon to spend your husband's money on your boyfriend. You can't just cut me off. I live here." "Actually, I can and you don't. Not anymore." I handed her a manila envelope. "Divorce papers. You've been served." She ripped open the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the legal documents. "Adultery? You're claiming adultery?" "I'm not claiming anything. I'm stating facts supported by evidence." I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Mrs. Portis's videos. Chase's Maserati in our driveway, Vivian greeting him in her robe. "Should I show you the rest?" "There are hours of footage." Her face went white. "You had me followed?" "I didn't have to. Turns out cheating wives aren't as sneaky as they think they are, especially when they're too narcissistic to consider that other people might be watching." She sank onto the couch, my couch, in my house, that she'd never contributed a penny toward. "Eli, we can work this out. We don't have to involve lawyers and courts and—" "Oh, but we do." I sat across from her, enjoying the way she flinched when I smiled. "See, Vivian, you made a critical error in judgment. You assumed I was weak because I loved you. You assumed I was stupid because I worked with my hands. You assumed I'd just roll over and let you take half of everything I built. I never said you were stupid. No, you said I couldn't keep up with you. In front of 20 people, after I offered to give you a child and a future." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That was your mistake. Because now I'm not trying to save our marriage, I'm trying to destroy you." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. "Please, Eli. I made a mistake. I was confused, and Chase was paying attention to me, and I felt young and beautiful, and you felt entitled to have your cake and eat it too. Keep the husband who paid for everything. Play house with the pretty boy who made you feel special." I stood up, straightening my work shirt. "How's that working out for you? What do you want? Money? I'll pay you back everything I spent." "With what money? You've never had a job. You've never paid a bill. You've never done anything but spend other people's money and look pretty while doing it. I walked to the front door and opened it. You've got 10 minutes to pack whatever clothes you can carry. After that, I'm calling the police to have you removed for trespassing. Where am I supposed to go? I hear Chase has a nice place in the city, assuming his trust fund hasn't run dry yet. She stumbled upstairs, and I could hear her moving around in what used to be our bedroom, throwing things into suitcases. My phone buzzed with texts from her friends. Apparently, word was spreading that Vivian Granger had been cut off and kicked out. Skylar. Heard about V. Is she okay? Jade. OMG, the drama. Need details. Margot. Call me when you can. We should talk. I ignored the first two and responded to Margot. Murphy's Tavern, 8 p.m. Come alone. Vivian came downstairs 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and a face full of rage. This isn't over, Eli. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer, and I'll take you for everything you're worth. Good luck with that. Hope your lawyer takes payment in Instagram followers, because that's about all you've got left. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the security camera, I watched her struggle to fit 2 oversized suitcases into her BMW, the BMW I'd been making payments on for 3 years. I called Ruth. The car, I said when she answered. Can I repossess it? Is it titled in your name? Both names, but I'm the primary and I make all the payments. Then yes, you can report it stolen if she refuses to return it. Want me to send a letter? Send it to Chase's address. I'll text you the details. That evening, Margot showed up at Murphy's looking nervous. She was the quiet one in Vivian's group, married to a decent guy who worked construction, and she'd always seemed uncomfortable with the mean girl dynamics that defined the rest of the circle. This is awkward, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. It's about to get more awkward, I replied. What do you know about Vivian and Chase? She fidgeted with her wedding ring, not meeting my eyes. Eli, I don't want to get in the middle of... You're already in the middle. The question is which side you want to be on when this is over. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. Finally, she looked up at me with something like relief in her expression. She's been planning this for months, she said quietly. The affair, the breakup, all of it. She showed us screenshots of your bank accounts, talked about how much she'd get in the divorce, said she was tired of being married to a blue-collar nobody when she could have a man with real money and culture. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice level. What else? The party was supposed to be her announcement that she was leaving you for Chase. She had this whole speech planned about outgrowing your marriage and finding her true self. But when you proposed having a baby, Margot shook her head. She panicked, said she couldn't pretend to be happy about starting a family with you when she was planning to start a new life with someone else. So she decided to humiliate me instead. Skylar's idea. She said it would be better to make you look pathetic so people would understand why Vivian had to leave. Margot reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. I recorded some of their conversations. I felt bad about what they were planning, but I didn't know how to warn you without causing drama. I pocketed the flash drive. What's on here? Audio of them planning the whole thing. Vivian talking about how much money she thinks she can get from you. Skylar coaching her on how to make you look bad in public. Jade suggesting they hire a photographer to document the breakup for Vivian's social media. The rage I'd been keeping carefully controlled threatened to boil over. They'd turned the destruction of my marriage into entertainment, a performance designed to maximize Vivian's victim narrative while making me the villain. There's more, Margot continued. Chase isn't what he seems. His trust fund got cut off 6 months ago when his parents found out about his pills problem. He's been living off credit cards and loans, pretending to be rich while he's actually broke. Vivian doesn't know. Now that was interesting. How do you know? My husband's company did some work on his condo. Chase bounced 3 checks before he finally paid in cash, crumpled 20s like he'd been saving up his allowance. I smiled for the first time all day. Margot, you just became my favorite person in this whole mess. I never liked how they treated you, she said. You're a good man, Eli. You deserve better than what she did to you. I'm about to get exactly what I deserve. And so is she. That night, I sat in my workshop listening to the audio files Margot had given me. Vivian's voice, clear as day, discussing her exit strategy like a corporate takeover. The house is worth at least $800,000, so I should get $400 from that, plus alimony, plus half his business assets. I'm thinking I can walk away with at least 600,000, maybe more if I play it right. Skylar's voice. You need to document everything that makes him look bad. Take pictures if he gets angry, record him if he yells. Judges love that domestic violence angle. Jaden. And make sure everyone knows you're the victim here. Post about your healing journey, your brave new beginning. The sympathy will get you more followers than any sponsored content. They'd plan to destroy me financially, socially, and legally, all while positioning Vivian as a brave woman escaping an oppressive marriage. I copied the files to 3 different backup locations, then started drafting emails. One to Ruth with the new evidence, one to a private investigator I'd worked with on insurance fraud cases, and one to a contact I had at the local newspaper, a reporter who specialized in exposing the hypocrisy of Millbrook's social elite. Vivian wanted to play games? Fine, but she'd just brought a plastic knife to a serious battle, and I'd been collecting ammunition for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Chase. We need to talk, man to man, tomorrow noon, Harbor Cafe. I typed back, see you there, Picasso. This was going to be fun. Chase was already sitting at a corner table when I walked into Harbor Cafe the next day, trying to look casual in his artfully distressed jeans and vintage band t-shirt that probably cost more than most people's car payments. He'd ordered some complicated coffee drink with foam art, because of course he had. I sat down across from him without ordering anything. You wanted to talk? Talk. He shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Look, Eli, this whole situation has gotten out of hand. Vivian's really upset, and I think we can all handle this like adults. Adults don't be with other men's wives in their own beds, I replied calmly. But please, continue. His face flushed red. It's not like that. Vivian and we have a real connection, something deeper than just physical. Right, that's why you've been paying for dinners with her husband's credit cards and letting her buy you presents with her husband's money. Very deep, very spiritual. You don't understand what she's been going through in that marriage. She felt trapped, unappreciated. She felt broke. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Tell me, Chase, when exactly were you planning to let her know about your little financial situation? Before or after she found out your trust fund got cut off? The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just like you don't know about the bounce checks, the maxed out credit cards, the fact that you're about 3 months away from losing that fancy condo. I smiled. Did you really think you could keep pretending to be rich forever? He was sweating now, despite the cafe's air conditioning. Vivian loves me. She's not with me for money. Vivian's never loved anything that couldn't buy her something pretty. Trust me, I've got 5 years of experience watching her work. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken that morning, his silver Maserati being loaded onto a repo truck. Speaking of which, how's the car situation working out? His eyes went wide. You son of a witch. You called them. I didn't have to. Turns out when you're 3 payments behind on a $70,000 car, the bank eventually comes looking for it. Amazing how that works. Chase was gripping his coffee cup so hard I thought it might shatter. What do you want? I want you to disappear. Pack up whatever's left in that condo before they change the locks, get in whatever car you can afford, and drive away from my wife permanently. She's not your wife anymore. She's not your girlfriend anymore either. Not once she finds out you're broker than a community college art student. I stood up, dropping a $5 bill on the table for his fancy coffee. You've got 24 hours. After that, I start making phone calls to people who might be very interested in your pharmaceutical hobbies. I was halfway to the door when he called out, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. You think you've won something? She never loved you. She told me you were boring in bed, that you had no ambition, that she was embarrassed to be seen with you. Every conversation in the cafe stopped. 20 pairs of eyes turned to watch the show. I slowly walked back to his table and leaned down close enough that only he could hear me. The difference between you and me, I said quietly, is that I never had to pay for her attention. You've been spending money you don't have to impress a woman who's going to dump you the second she finds out you're poor. I'm going to enjoy watching that happen. I straightened up and addressed the room full of staring faces. Sorry for the disruption, folks. Young love, you know how it is. The laughter that followed me out the door was worth every penny this divorce was going to cost me. That afternoon, Vivian called me 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail, then listened to her messages while I worked on refinishing a Victorian-era banister in my shop. Message 1. Eli, we need to talk. Chase told me what you said to him, and you're being completely unreasonable. Message 5. I know you're angry, but destroying Chase's life isn't going to fix our marriage. Message 10. His car got repossessed. Did you have something to do with that? Message 15. Call me back, goddammit. You can't just ignore me forever. Message 17. I know you think you're punishing me, but you're only hurting yourself. I'm trying to handle this with dignity, but you're making it impossible. Dignity. That was rich coming from a woman who'd been screwing her boyfriend in our marital bed twice a week for 2 months. My phone rang again. Frankie this time. You need to get down to Murphy's, he said without preamble. Your wife's here with her girlfriends and they're getting loud. Drunk loud or angry loud. Both. And they're talking about you, specifically. They're talking about how they're going to make sure everyone in town knows what a controlling a-hole you are. I looked at the half-finished banister, then at my watch. 5:30 on a Thursday evening, prime time for Millbrook's after-work gossip session. Save me a seat at the bar, I said. This should be entertaining. Murphy's was packed when I arrived, the usual mix of construction workers, fishermen, and service industry folks who kept the town running, while the yacht club crowd looked down their noses at us. Vivian and her remaining friends had claimed a high-top table in the center of the room, clearly performing their outrage for maximum audience. Skylar was in full dramatic mode, gesturing with her wine glass as she spoke. I mean, it's financial misuse, plain and simple. Cutting off her access to money, kicking her out of her own home. It's not her home, called out Danny Morrison, one of the guys from my crew. She never paid for any of it. That's not the point, Jade snapped. She's his wife. She has rights. She had responsibilities too, said another voice from the crowd, like not screwing around on her husband. The room was taking sides, and it wasn't going the way Vivian's friends had expected. These weren't country club wives who lived off their husband's money without contributing anything. These were working people who understood that marriage was a partnership, not a meal ticket. Vivian spotted me at the bar and stood up unsteadily. She'd clearly been drinking for a while. There he is, she announced, pointing at me with theatrical flair. The man who thinks he can control his wife by taking away her credit cards. The room went quiet. Every eye turned toward me, waiting to see how I'd respond to being called out in public for the second time this week. I picked up my beer and walked over to their table, pulling out my phone as I went. You want to talk about control, Vivian? Let's talk about it. I opened the audio app and hit play on one of Margot's recordings. Vivian's voice filled the room, crystal clear through the bar's sound system. The house is worth at least $800,000, so I should get $400 from that, plus alimony, plus half his business assets. I'm thinking I can walk away with at least $600,000. The color drained from her face as her own words echoed around the silent bar. Skylar and Jade looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. I let it play for another 30 seconds, long enough for everyone to hear her discussing strategy for maximizing her divorce payout, then turned it off. Control, I said to the room, is planning to destroy your husband's life while pretending to be the victim. Control is spending months plotting how to take half of everything he worked for while you were screwing your boyfriend in his bed. You recorded me? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't record anything, but your friends aren't as loyal as you thought they were. I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. See, here's what really happened. My wife decided she wanted to trade up to a richer man. She spent months planning how to leave me for her boyfriend, while taking as much of my money as possible. She turned our divorce into a performance designed to make me look like the bad guy while she played the victim. I turned back to Vivian, who was now crying into her hands. The only thing I controlled was my own response to being betrayed, and I chose not to roll over and let you destroy me. Skylar tried to salvage the situation. Eli, you're clearly hurt, but airing your private business in public— Shut up, Skylar. The voice came from behind me. Margot had walked in during my speech, and she looked angrier than I'd ever seen her. You were the one who suggested she hire a photographer to document the breakup. You were the one who coached her on how to make Eli look pathetic. You don't get to lecture anyone about dignity. The room erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. Vivian's public support was evaporating in real time as people processed what they'd heard. This is insane, Jade said, standing up and grabbing her purse. I'm not staying for this. Good idea, I replied. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. She fled, followed quickly by Skylar, who shot me a look that could have melted steel. That left Vivian alone at the table, mascara running down her cheeks, surrounded by a room full of people who now knew exactly who she really was. I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on her table. See you in court, sweetheart. Hope Chase is worth it. As I walked toward the door, spontaneous applause broke out behind me. Not from everyone, but from enough people to make the point clear. Millbrook's working class had chosen their side in this divorce, and it wasn't Team Vivian. My phone was buzzing with texts before I even reached my truck. Frankie. Holy crap, that was beautiful. Ruth. Whatever you just did, I'm getting calls. Good calls. Annie. Drinks are on me tomorrow. That was epic. And one from an unknown number that made me smile. You bastard. This isn't over. V. I typed back, you're right, it's just getting started. The video went viral overnight. Not Hollywood viral, but Millbrook viral. Which meant that by Friday morning, everyone in town had seen cell phone footage of me playing Vivian's recorded confession at Murphy's Tavern. The local Facebook groups were on fire. The coffee shops were buzzing. And my phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Ruth called at 7 a.m., sounding more excited than I'd ever heard her. Eli, you magnificent bastard. What did you do? I've got 3 different people calling to offer testimony about Vivian's behavior. The prosecutor's office wants copies of those recordings for potential fraud charges, and someone from the Boston Herald is asking questions about a story they're working on. Fraud charges? Using marital assets to fund an extramarital affair can be prosecuted as theft in Massachusetts, especially when there's evidence of premeditation and an intent to defraud the marital estate. She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. How much evidence do we have? Enough to bury her. Financial records, video surveillance, audio recordings, witness testimony. Plus her boyfriend's broke, which means she was funding their entire relationship with my money. This just gets better. I'll have the amended divorce filing ready by Monday. We're going for full asset protection, no alimony, and reimbursement for marital funds used in the affair. After I hung up with Ruth, I drove to the job site where my crew was working on a historic renovation downtown. The guys were already there, but instead of working, they were clustered around Danny's phone, watching the Murphys video for what was probably the 10th time. Boss, called out Mike Santos, my lead carpenter. You're famous. My wife's book club is calling you a hero. My sister wants your autograph, added Tommy Chen. Says you did what every betrayed spouse wishes they could do. I appreciated the support, but I had work to focus on. We were 3 days behind schedule on the renovation, and client satisfaction mattered more than social media fame. Back to work, ladies. These walls won't restore themselves. But even as we worked, I could feel the energy in the air. Word was spreading beyond Millbrook now. The story had everything people loved. Betrayal, revenge, a working-class hero, standing up to entitled rich people. I was getting friend requests from strangers, interview requests from bloggers, and marriage proposals from women who thought humiliating my cheating wife in public made me husband material. Around noon, Margot showed up at the job site with coffee and news. Vivian's having a breakdown, she reported, settling onto a stack of lumber while I took a break from sanding window frames. She's been calling everyone she knows, trying to find somewhere to stay. Apparently, Chase kicked her out of his condo. When? This morning. Turns out he wasn't thrilled about being exposed as a broke fraud in front of the whole town. Plus, his landlord served him with eviction papers yesterday. I couldn't help but smile. Where's she staying now? Motel 6 out by the highway, paying cash because her credit cards are still frozen. Margot shook her head. She called me crying, begging me to let her stay in our guest room. I told her I was done enabling her victim act. What about Skylar and Jade? Skylar's husband found out about her involvement in the whole scheme. He's furious about being associated with it. Apparently, it's bad for his banking career to have his wife caught on video coaching someone through divorce fraud. Margot grinned. And Jade's event planning business is getting review bombed by people who saw the Murphys video. Turns out, clients don't want to hire someone who helps orchestrate public humiliations. The collateral damage was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. Vivian's entire social circle was imploding as people distanced themselves from the scandal. There's more, Margot continued. Chase's parents saw the video. His mother called Vivian directly to tell her that her son wouldn't be inheriting anything as long as he was involved with that trashy gold digger. Harsh, but accurate. Oh, and the yacht club voted to suspend Vivian's membership pending a review of her conduct. Apparently, they don't appreciate being associated with adultery and financial fraud. I finished my coffee and stood up to get back to work. Sounds like natural consequences to me. Eli, Margot said quietly, she's talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else where people don't know about all this. Good. She should have thought about that before she decided to make our divorce into public theater. That evening, I was in my workshop when the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera and saw Vivian standing on my front porch, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she'd clearly been crying. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. What do you want, Vivian? I want this to stop. Her voice was hoarse, defeated. I want you to call off whatever campaign you're running against me. I'm not running a campaign. I'm just not covering for you anymore. You destroyed my life. No, you destroyed your life. I just stopped pretending it didn't happen. I leaned against the doorframe, studying her face. How's the motel? She flinched like I'd slapped her. You know about that? I know about everything. Chase dumping you, your friends abandoning you, your parents refusing to take your calls because they're embarrassed by the scandal. I know about the yacht club, the credit cards, the fact that you're down to your last $200 in cash. Please, she whispered. I'll sign whatever divorce papers you want. I'll walk away with nothing. Just make it stop. Make what stop? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just not protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. The video, the recordings, telling everyone about Chase's money problems. The video was taken in a public place where you chose to perform your victim act. The recordings were made by your own friends, and Chase's financial situation is public record. I straightened up, preparing to close the door. You wanted to be the center of attention, Vivian. Congratulations, you got what you wanted. I never wanted this. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. You wanted to paint me as the villain while you played the wronged wife. You wanted to take half of everything I worked for while running off with your boyfriend. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The only thing you didn't want was to face any consequences for it. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. I loved you once. Doesn't that count for something? Maybe it did. But you ended whatever love we had when you decided I wasn't worth your loyalty. I started to close the door, then paused. By the way, you might want to find a new lawyer. Word is, yours dropped you when the retainer check bounced. I closed the door and walked back to my workshop, leaving her crying on the porch. Through the security camera, I watched her stand there for another 10 minutes before finally walking away. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. Vivian's lawyer contacted me. She wants to settle. No alimony, no asset division. She just wants out. Should I draw up papers? I typed back, do it. But I want reimbursement for every penny she spent on the affair. How much are we talking? I pulled up my spreadsheets, calculating months of dinners, hotels, gifts, and entertainment. $23,467 plus interest. Jesus, Eli. She really went all out. She thought she was spending her future ex-husband's money. Turns out, she was just digging her own grave. Ruth, papers will be ready Monday. This is going to be the most one-sided divorce settlement I've ever written. I set the phone aside and went back to work on the antique chair I was restoring. The wood was damaged, scarred by years of neglect and misuse, but underneath the surface, the original beauty was still there. It just needed someone willing to do the careful, patient work of bringing it back to life. Unlike my marriage, this chair was worth saving. Outside, I could hear the ocean waves hitting the rocks below the house. The same sound I'd fallen asleep to for the past 7 years, first as a bachelor, then as a husband, now as a man preparing to be single again. But for the first time in months, the sound was peaceful rather than lonely. I was finally free to build the life I actually wanted, instead of the one I'd been performing for someone who never appreciated it. Vivian had wanted to trade up to a better life. Instead, she'd traded away the best thing she'd ever had. A man who would have given her everything if she'd just been honest about what she wanted. Now she had nothing, and I had everything that mattered. My home, my business, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I'd fought back when someone tried to destroy me. Some people might call what I did cruel. I called it justice. And I wasn't done yet. The divorce papers were signed on a rainy Monday morning in Ruth's office. Vivian showed up looking like a ghost, pale, thin, wearing a cheap dress I didn't recognize. Her new lawyer was a fresh-faced kid from legal aid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The settlement was exactly what I'd demanded. No alimony, no asset division, full reimbursement for the money she'd spent on her affair. In exchange, she got to walk away without facing criminal fraud charges. Mrs. Granger, Ruth said formally, do you understand that by signing these documents, you're waiving all claims to marital property, including the house, business assets, and retirement accounts? Vivian nodded without looking up from the papers. And you acknowledge that you will repay the sum of $23,467 in marital funds used for extramarital purposes? Another nod. How exactly does your client plan to repay that amount? Ruth asked the legal aid lawyer. She has no income and no assets. The kid shuffled his papers nervously. My client is prepared to enter into a payment plan. No payment plan, I interrupted. Full amount, 30 days, or I press criminal charges. Vivian finally looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Eli, please, I don't have that kind of money. I can't get a job that pays enough to... You should have thought about that before you spent it. I turned to Ruth. Are the papers ready? She slid the documents across the table. I signed my name with the same pen I'd used to sign our marriage certificate 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vivian signed with shaking hands, her tears dropping onto the legal documents that officially ended our marriage. Congratulations, Ruth said dryly. You're divorced. I walked out of that office a free man for the first time in 5 years. No more joint bank accounts, no more credit card bills for clothes I'd never see her wear. No more pretending to care about her friend's drama. No more walking on eggshells around someone who saw my love as weakness and my generosity as stupidity. But I wasn't quite done with Vivian yet. That evening, I drove to the Motel 6, where she'd been staying since Chase kicked her out. Her BMW, my BMW, was parked outside room 127, looking out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and economy cars. I knocked on the door. She opened it wearing a bathrobe, her hair unwashed, her face puffy from crying. What do you want now? She asked wearily. To give you something. I held out a manila envelope. Consider it a divorce gift. She took it suspiciously, opening it to find a cashier's check for $25,000. I don't understand. It's enough to pay back what you owe me, plus a little extra to get you started somewhere else. Anywhere else. I smiled. There's just one condition. What? You leave Millbrook. Tonight, you pack up whatever's left of your life, you cash that check, and you disappear. Permanently. She stared at the check like it might vanish if she blinked. Why would you do this? Because I want you gone more than I want revenge. Because watching you self-destruct in my hometown is getting boring. I leaned against the doorframe, and because I'm not actually the monster you tried to make me out to be. Eli, don't thank me, don't apologize, don't try to make this into some kind of redemption moment. Just take the money and go. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen in years. Actual remorse. I really did love you once, she said quietly. I know, but love wasn't enough for you. You wanted more than I could give you, and instead of being honest about it, you decided to take it anyway. I straightened up, preparing to leave. Maybe next time, try talking to your husband before you start shopping for a replacement. I walked back to my truck without looking back. Through the rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the doorway, holding the check, watching me drive away. The next morning, room 120 was empty. The BMW was gone. Vivian Granger had vanished from Millbrook, like she'd never existed at all. 2 weeks later, I threw a party. Not a divorce party, I wasn't that petty. Just a regular Friday night barbecue for my friends, my crew, and the neighbors who'd supported me through the whole mess. The same rooftop terrace where my marriage had died was now full of people who actually truly care about me. Frankie was manning the grill, telling increasingly exaggerated stories about the Murphy's Tavern confrontation. Danny and the crew were arguing about baseball, while their wives gossiped about whose turn it was to host book club. Mrs. Portis was holding the court near the bar, regaling anyone who'd listen with tales of her neighborhood surveillance operation. Margot showed up around 8 with her husband and a bottle of champagne. For the man of the hour, she said, presenting it with a flourish. What's the occasion? Freedom, she replied simply. I opened the bottle and poured glasses for everyone who wanted one. When the crowd had gathered around, I raised my glass for a toast. 5 years ago, I thought I knew what happiness looked like, I began. I thought it was about finding someone to share your life with, building something together, creating a partnership that would last forever. The crowd listened quietly, faces lit by the string lights I'd hung around the terrace. I was wrong. Happiness isn't about finding someone who needs you. It's about finding people who choose you. People who show up when things get difficult. People who have your back when the world turns against you. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, real friends, loyal employees, neighbors who'd become family. I spent 5 years trying to make someone love me enough to stay. Tonight, I'm surrounded by people who never needed convincing. I raised my glass higher. To friendship, to loyalty, to the family you choose when the family you're born with lets you down. Cheers! The crowd responded, glasses clinking in the warm evening air. As the party wound down and people started heading home, I found myself alone on the terrace for the first time since the night my marriage ended. The ocean stretched out below me, dark and endless, full of possibilities I was finally free to explore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the pictures from your party on Facebook. Looks like you're doing well. I'm sorry for everything. Take care of yourself. V. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations were over and some chapters were closed. Some people belonged in the past where they couldn't hurt you anymore. I finished my beer and headed inside to clean up. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant sleeping in, working on projects I actually cared about, and spending my money on things that made me happy instead of someone else's idea of what I should want. For the first time in 5 years, my life belonged entirely to me. I raised my empty bottle one last time, toasting the empty terrace and the endless ocean and the future I was finally free to build. To starting over, I said to the night air, and to never settling for less than I deserve again.